Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. As a court battle over President Trump's federalizing of California's National Guard continues, so do protests across the nation. That includes one in Oceanside this evening, and it started not long ago. And that is where we find our North County reporter, Tanya Thorne. Tanya, what do you have?
John, you can see that a protest is underway here in the city of Oceanside. Protesters behind me holding signs and waving flags from all over the world, really. And this just comes at the foot of the community's frustrations over immigration raids that have been happening in this community and throughout our nation. And I'm here with Steve Hymas, one of the organizers of this gathering today. Steve, tell me why you decided to organize this here today.
I think it's just important to highlight the humanity portion of things. Above all politics, if you look around, you have flags from everywhere: Salvador, Mexico, Brazil, Philippines. You know, we're all being affected by this hate. And I think it's important to respond with love and respect.
And John, you know, this comes right before a nationwide protest happening throughout the country being called the No Kings protest. And we will actually be covering that. But as you can see, the crowds here are gathering. They do plan on going all the way down to the Civic Center. We'll be here to see if things escalate or if everything remains peaceful. Reporting live from Oceanside, Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. We live in response to a monarchy. Those are the words of a federal judge before he ruled against the Trump administration's military deployment of troops. Judge Charles Breyer ruled that Trump's actions, quote, were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Former San Diego U.S. Attorney Carol Lamb says Breyer references the 10th Amendment because he is trying to get the correct balance between the rights of the state government and the rights of the president. She says President Trump's descriptions of the threat posed by the L.A. protests were deliberate and intended to fit in with federal statutes.
I think we've seen here a situation where the President of the United States has decided that he will take every tool in his toolbox to assert his authority and to assert his beliefs, whether it's in a non-forceful or a forceful way. That's an extremely dangerous situation for our democracy.
After the ruling, an appeals court granted a stay of the judge's ruling, allowing Trump to keep the National Guard deployed for a few more days while a 3-judge panel considers the case. As the court battle over President Trump's federalizing of the California National Guard continues, protests in L.A. have now been playing out for a week. Michael Yoshida has the latest from Los Angeles.
As anti-ICE protests spring up in cities across the country, the National Guard troops deployed to Los Angeles, along with a Marine battalion, are allowed to remain there at the direction of President Donald Trump for now. A federal appeals court ruling late Thursday paused an earlier decision by a U.S. district judge that declared the National Guard had been unlawfully federalized by Trump. In a Truth Social post, Trump thanked the court and claimed if he didn't send in the Guard, L.A. would be, quote, burning to the ground. We saved L.A. This despite persistent objections from California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Police do policing. Military for the battlefield.
As the battle in the courts continues, so do the protests. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass says the nighttime curfew will likely remain in place for a few more days. But the disruption caused by the unrest is now being felt by area businesses.
All you need to do is walk the streets, and you can see what's happening, the general sentiment of the fear that lives in our community right now.
Anthony Rodriguez, president and CEO of the LA Fashion District, says there's low foot traffic and storefronts are boarded up in the downtown area that's typically buzzing with customers, vendors, and tourists.
I honestly don't see how we're going to be bounced back from this.
The escalating immigration raids, too, are beginning to take a toll.
People are afraid to get out, because they've been hearing the rumors that ICE are here, and they don't get out. They're scared.
In Los Angeles, Michael Yoshida, KPBS News.
Protests and counter-protests over the federal immigration raids are expected to continue, including one in downtown San Diego planned for tomorrow. Coming up, what you need to know to stay safe if you plan to participate or just watch.
Well, enjoy the quiet, cooler weather at night over the next few nights, because daytime highs are going to be surging deep into the 90s and even triple digits if you live in the inland areas, eastern parts of San Diego County. Tonight, we're very comfortable region-wide, looking good. Some low clouds will return to the coast, but you'll notice an extreme heat warning is in effect this weekend for the inland deserts. Slightly different from the old excessive heat warning, but it's all the same message. An extreme heat warning is in effect. We'll have details on how high we go in just a bit.
There are international calls for calm after Israel launched unprecedented attacks on Iran. Israel says its strikes may not be over as Iran begins counterstrikes. Karen Kaifa has the latest, including reaction from the White House.
After Israel launched an unprecedented attack on Iran, blasts in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem Friday night. And the Israel Defense Forces said they had identified incoming missiles launched from Iran toward Israel. Iran said via state media Friday night that its retaliation had begun. But observers of the region say the potential for full-scale conflict depends upon their capability to sustain it.
If they actually have the capacity left to be able to respond. I think they have been taken completely by surprise.
Israel launched its first strikes just before sunrise in Iran on Friday. The operation, Israel said, was aimed at stopping Tehran's progress toward developing nuclear weapons, progress Israel sees as a threat. The attacks killed some of Iran's top military leaders and nuclear scientists and struck some of its nuclear facilities. President Trump said on social media Friday that Iran should agree to a nuclear deal, quote, before there is nothing left. One expert says if the intent is to pressure Iran to the negotiating table, it may have the opposite effect.
If it doesn't respond, it loses all credibility, it will be weak, and the Israelis are not going to stop. And so Iran is bound to retaliate, and then President Trump is going to be in a very difficult position managing an escalation.
The Middle East tension sent crude oil prices soaring on Friday, and airline stocks dropped as a number of major global carriers, including Emirates, Lufthansa, and Air France, suspended flights to and from locations in the region. In Washington, Karen Kaifa, KPBS News.
More than $9 billion in federal spending cuts to public radio and television are one step closer to happening. House Republicans approved a request from the White House yesterday to claw back funding already approved by Congress. The cuts would target the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the United States Agency for International Development. The requests will now go to the Senate, where only 51 Republicans need to agree, but several Republican senators have raised concern about spending cuts. KPBS General Manager Deanna Mackey responded to the news in a statement today. It reads, in part, this rescission bill, if passed in the Senate, puts more than 1,000 stations across the country at risk. I hope the Senate will listen to the hundreds of thousands of Americans who are voicing their support and will vote against this devastating piece of legislation to preserve this vital public service.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, Iran retaliates against Israel with missile strikes of its own. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
This week, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dismissed the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Vaccine Advisory Committee and named new members. KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco says a former CDC advisor warns the changes could create confusion, undo decades of progress, and put lives at risk.
Dr. Mark Sawyer has spent his career working on vaccine policy and public health. He was a member of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices for 5 years, the group that helps set vaccine recommendations nationwide.
The committee is very carefully formulated, they're vetted, their conflicts of interest are looked at, and to scrap all that and suddenly put in brand new people who, some of whom look like have not had any vaccine experience, is just crazy.
These recommendations influence everything from school requirements to federal health programs. Sawyer says removing vaccine experts will put public health at risk.
If there aren't people who are well-versed in the delivery of vaccines, this is just going to create more confusion in the public and lead to less vaccination.
One of the new appointees is tied to what he describes as an anti-vaccine group. He fears this could bring a return of preventable disease outbreaks like measles. In 2019, the CDC reported over 1,200 measles cases, the most in nearly 30 years, largely due to declining vaccination. This year's total is already approaching that number.
I'm afraid that this political experiment is going way too far and that people are going to suffer as a result.
Kennedy called his decision to retire the existing committee members as, quote, a major step towards restoring public trust in vaccines.
The germs, the bacteria and the viruses out there infect people regardless of what their political views are.
Sawyer says he's lost confidence in federal agencies like the CDC to give clear vaccine guidance. He encourages families to speak with their doctors directly. Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News.
A concert, a mall, in airports, and on planes. Those are some of the places where people in the U.S. have reportedly been exposed to measles. Mandy Gaither has more on how to pack virus protection into your summer travel plans.
It's a highly contagious disease, easily spread through a cough or sneeze. Measles cases continue to climb in the U.S., prompting an advisory from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, warning of exposures during summer travel.
I think there are a number of viral infections that we need to be concerned about when traveling or just in the summertime.
Dr. Daniel Koritskis with Brigham and Women's Hospital says the best protection against measles is vaccination. The CDC advises the virus can live for up to 2 hours in the air or on surfaces, and an infected person can spread measles up to 4 days before until 4 days after their rash starts. The measles vaccine is routinely given to children in 2 doses, one typically between 12 and 15 months, the other usually around 4 to 6 years old. But adults who haven't been vaccinated or are unsure of their vaccination history should also consider the vaccine.
In some circumstances, it might be appropriate for infants to get immunized, even if they're younger than 15 months.
Other viral travel threats, norovirus. Koritskis says hand hygiene can help protect against that virus. And there's still COVID-19. He says cases typically tick upwards during the summer.
If you are somebody who's 65 and older or have a medical condition that puts you at greater risk for severe COVID, and you're going to be in crowded situations, especially indoors, then you should seriously consider getting a COVID booster if you haven't already done so.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
The city of San Diego has forged a partnership with a local nonprofit to provide the drug Naloxone in more places throughout the city. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us about the problem of opioid overdose and the campaign to stop it.
A library is a community gathering spot for lots of people, and some of them suffer from opioid addiction. That's why the first step in a program to hand out the overdose reversal medication Naloxone began at San Diego's Linda Vista Branch Library. City Councilman Raul Campillo was there to promote it, and he said he had a good reason.
11 years ago, my brother overdosed and died from an opioid addiction. And so it's people like him that we're trying to serve to make sure families like theirs, families like mine, don't have to go through that again.
The nonprofit coalition the city is partnering with is focused on providing people with training and a drug that can prevent overdose deaths. The Harm Reduction Coalition wants Naloxone to be everywhere. I was given 2 boxes by just showing up to their press conference.
We have the goal of saturating the community with Naloxone. Everybody should be carrying Naloxone. If there's a barrier, I want to hear about it. If you can't get Naloxone somewhere, tell me. We'll work on getting it there.
Naloxone, also called Narcan, comes in a nasal spray bottle. Each box contains 2. When an overdose is underway, naloxone knocks an opioid like fentanyl off the opioid receptor sites in your brain. So when you find someone who may be having an OD and is totally unresponsive,
to do 1 dose of this up the nose, and then you do 2 minutes of CPR or rescue breathing. You want to keep that blood flow going, but you want to keep the oxygen going to the brain is the most important thing.
And call 911, also very important. The Harm Reduction Coalition gets naloxone from San Diego County, which gets it from the state. Supplies are plentiful, but not always accessible. The coalition and the city are bringing naloxone to many public properties where people gather, with a focus on libraries.
Today, we are at the Linda Vista Library. We are going to have many more of these pop-ups throughout San Diego to make sure that wherever you are, you can come get it for free. But right now, we're at the Linda Vista Library.
Opioid deaths in San Diego County have been on the decline for the past couple of years. The Harm Reduction Coalition wants to get large supplies of naloxone to 100 city locations, and by the end of the summer, they'll be halfway there. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Many San Diegans are joining the No Kings Day protests happening nationwide this weekend. San Diego police say they are working with organizers to ensure the protests here remain peaceful. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen has more on the preparation and what your rights are in a protest.
This is what SDPD does not want this weekend, a peaceful protest that escalated into violence.
Our main focus is public safety, and that is for everybody involved.
San Diego Police spokesperson Lieutenant Travis Easter says the department has been working with organizers ahead of the protest tomorrow to make sure everyone is on the same page. He says SDPD is not ICE and does not work with federal immigration enforcement.
We are still doing law enforcement activities, whether that be, arresting people and performing enforcement. That is still happening every day. But that doesn't mean that we're ICE. It doesn't mean that it is all ICE related.
There are about a dozen local protests around the county tomorrow. They are part of the nationwide No Kings Day demonstration.
To keep their greedy hands off our health care, our veterans benefits, our public lands, our rights.
Opposing President Trump's military parade.
This is where one of the No Kings protests is happening this weekend, and organizers say they don't want violence either because their message is this is America and we don't stand for fascism, and violence would only get in the way of that message.
While we see protests that are overwhelmingly peaceful, when some bad actors engage in property destruction or violence, the Trump team says, see there, now we need to escalate further. And that's Trump's plan. Rinse and repeat. It's straight from the authoritarian playbook.
For those attending the protests tomorrow, civil rights attorney Timothy Scott says, know your rights.
Protesting is a core part of the First Amendment.
Among those rights is the right to record police encounters. But he says, don't engage with officers unless you have to and de-escalate the situation quickly.
When it comes to a police encounter, the goal is to end it quickly, to not prolong it. And some key phrases are, am I being detained? Am I free to go? You say those things out loud to make sure that they can't characterize the encounter as consensual when in fact it's a detention.
If the situation gets out of hand, police say they are prepared and are working with partner agencies to ensure what happened in LA doesn't happen here. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Well, the heat is on. It's going to be a very hot weekend away from the coast. An extreme heat warning is in effect for the deserts this Saturday and Sunday. We'll turn a little warmer each day through Sunday, and you'll notice a little bit of an increase even just a few miles inland from the coast, but it'll be searing heat into the deserts, and there's still some fire danger. Now, the winds are not terribly strong, but we have had some fires like the Ranch Fire far to our east and northeast over the past few days, multiple thousand acres burnt. There have been some evacuations at times. Crews are making some progress there, but tonight we'll be down to 61 with some low clouds near the coast. Then the heat begins to build. So you'll notice, remember the old excessive heat warning? Slight change in phrasing. This is extreme heat warning. It's the same thing, kind of replaced the old type of warning from the National Weather Service. And you can see inland areas, the deserts are under one of these extreme heat warnings for the weekend. Daytime weather really steamy. There's a strong ridge of high pressure parked right over the desert southwest, and we're certainly close enough to the belly of that ridge that we're going to be dealing with temperatures 10 to 15 degrees above historical averages in April or May. That's not a huge deal, but you get into June, July, and August, and if you're 10 to 15 degrees above the historical average high for this time of the year, hot is really hot, and there is going to be that risk of heat-related illness for anybody, especially if you're out maybe Father's Day weekend traveling with Dad, and you're going to be up there doing some hiking. Even in the mountains, it's going to get warm. And take it easy. Plenty of water is key. Now, if you're up atop Mount Laguna, here into areas around Mount Laguna, even in town, but especially up to the highest of elevations, you'll be in the 70s. But Borrego Springs, 107, 90 on Saturday into Ramona. Sunday's going to be a little hotter than that. You're going to see that trend warming up Sunday and Monday. Coastal areas surging to the mid-70s, still pleasant. This is a popular place to be for good reason. But inland areas, here we go, 89 on Monday, the hottest of this spell. Lots of sunshine out there. Don't forget the sunscreen. And also keep plenty of fluids with you and water. Into the mountains, upper 70s. It's going to be warm, though. And again, if you're not up in the highest of elevations, it'll be a very warm, if not hot, journey up there if you're on a hike. 111 Sunday and Monday, the peak of this stretch of very hot weather in the deserts. Sunday and Monday, prepare for it. It's going to be sweltering even into Tuesday and Wednesday. For AccuWeather, I'm Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
Here's something fun to kick off the weekend and maybe spark a little nostalgia. In 2023, KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando checked out the graffiti murals being painted at Arcade Monsters in East Village. But she hasn't had a chance to return and explore the full 13,000 square feet of retro and modern gameplay until now.
Okay, this is Arcade Monsters. This is 2 floors, 200 games of fun. So I'm going to go inside, prepare for a little sensory overload. Ta-da! Maybe to see what my odds are of winning any of these games, I'm going to check with Zoltar and see what my fortune's like. My wish is granted. As you can see, I'm a kaiju fan, so I'm trying to find a Godzilla pinball machine. And I spot it right there.
Godzilla versus Geiger.
So let's see how long I can last on Godzilla pinball. What's fun about this game is you've got some Godzilla figures in here, and they give you some clips also. Look how many cities were destroyed.
We are tallying up the damage done to the city thus far.
I don't think it was total humiliation, but I don't think I took over Tokyo. You can also find games for your pent-up hostility. So I do boxing, and I found this. Not sure I know how to do it, but I'm going to try hitting it. Physical harm. Yes! All right. I moved up to killer. Whoa! That's what they mean by 3D. The whole booth shakes.
That was scary.
I think I'm dead. We're getting an earthquake. Oh! That was fun. I did not expect the whole seats to vibrate. Now I understand why it's 3D. I thought it was going to be immersive VR.
There's also 3D glasses over here, it looks like.
We failed to use our 3D glasses. So actually, I guess it's 4D. We get the 3D glasses and the vibrating seats. Let's try a driving game. I can't actually kill anyone on this, so we should all be safe. Who's the best emo guy? Let's see. Oh, wow, you feel the seat move. Should get like the stick shift and things that don't show how bad I'm actually driving. I may have taken out a small village. I might be more destructive than Godzilla. Am I in Japan now? Which side of the road am I supposed to be on? Right? Left or right?
It almost looks like you're going the wrong way.
Okay, I think I'm done. I didn't crash. So, all right. I don't think I'm designed for a driving game. Only fighting. Don't show that. Don't play like me. And you can find all sorts of games here, but if you're kind of old school, and I'm old school, but I may not remember all this, but look at this room. You've got an old Nintendo deck. So I'm gonna see if my rusty fingers can remember how to play. Do they have blades of steel? We'll have to go for Mario then. Oh, Super Punch Out. All right, this is gonna be horribly embarrassing. So let's keep it short. I forgot who's good and who's bad. Uh-oh, this looks dark and dangerous. The 1,000 Deaths of Beth Accomando. I remember that sound of dying. I heard it quite a lot. Oh, died again. Game over. That's enough embarrassment, all right? From Arcade Monsters in East Village, I'm Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Okay, Beth, you did crash a couple times, and better luck next time with Tokyo. Be sure to join us tonight for KPBS News This Week, where we revisit the most impactful and intriguing original reporting of the week. This Week airs every Friday at 8:30 here on KPBS. And, of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. She did crash. You saw that, right? Thank you for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have an excellent evening and a wonderful weekend.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Previs Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.